G'day everyone, I'm artist Wayne Dowsent and welcome to my ANZAC portrait series. Beside me is a painting of a very young Bruce Robertson. Before the outbreak of World War II, Bruce had joined the militia. But throughout his childhood, he always had a great love of aeroplanes. So naturally, once war broke out, Bruce left the army to join the Air Force. So ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy part one of our interview with Mr. Bruce Robertson.
My name is Bruce Robertson. I was born at Lakemba, 9 miles from the city of Sydney, and my father and mother had 2 boys, older than me, and I had a little sister. My father died when I was 3. It was a blow for everybody. My mother had to look after this young family, and shortly thereafter her mother died, and the next year after her father died, so we were a bit isolated. And her brother came and lived with us, and he acted through our lives as a guardian for us, so it was wonderful. He didn't get married. He's devoted his life to helping his sister and the family. Lakemba is a great place to live, wonderful school life, and I played all sorts of sports. It was all outdoor things, cricket, no tarred roads in those days. There were not many motor trucks, very few motor cars. Councils, instead of having a big truck to carry their loads, whatever it was, and work on the roads, they had horse and dray. And that dray was a tip dray. They could tip it up and tip dirt out or whatever it was. And the old Clydesdale horse would be plodding along the road, just plod, plod, plod. And so the baker had a baker's cart with his horse, and the milkman came with his horse and cart and poured the milk out in pints and quarts, whatever it was, into your container, into your billy or jug or whatever you wanted for milk. There were various people came around selling rabbits, rabbitoes, call out rabbito, and you'd buy a rabbit, and that'd do you for a good meal, and lovely. We used to call it underground chicken rabbit, and it was lovely. Everyone loved rabbit. The bottle-o used to come around. If you had any empty bottles, lemonade bottles or beer bottles, whatever it was, he would take them from you. A penny for a lemonade bottle, halfpenny for a beer bottle. Now, a penny is equivalent to a cent. Halfpenny would be half a cent, but we didn't have half cents. So it was a great time. If you saw a bottle somewhere or other, you'd take it home and then give it to the bottle and get a penny for it. A penny would buy quite a lot of sweets in a shop. You could get 10 aniseed balls for a halfpenny. So that was something to go on with. They lasted a long time. We went to the pictures on Saturday afternoons for 6pence, 5 cents, and saw a film and a serial and cowboys and Indians and all sorts of things. It was a great time. When I went to school, the Depression came late in the 1920s and early 30s, and it levelled everybody in a whole street. Your street, there may be 3 or 4 men working in the whole street, no one else. Everybody was levelled to the same level. A manager of a firm, he wouldn't have a job. He was the same as everybody else. And so everybody was a big family, even though it was Depression. We didn't have much. We made things do. We had ingenuity. Men made things. People grew their own vegetables in their yard so that they were self-sufficient, had fowls, had eggs, and so on, and lived that way. Many young men went to the country and travelled around tramping, humping their bluey, their swag on their back, and go to a farm and do a day's work just for the meal that they received. That was a tough time for everybody, but you relied on newspapers for news, and you bought the paper for a penny or 2pence, whatever it was, 2 pence. When I went to school, I went barefooted. my school photo showed every boy with bare feet. Nobody wore shoes. You had to save money, and you saved it by not wearing shoes. And so the soles of your feet were as thick as concrete and as tough as concrete. And also, your boys' trousers wore out in the seat of their pants, often. You'd laugh at that. But every boy had patches on the seats of his pants. And girls, their panties were made from flour bags. The grocer would flour came in big sacks of flour, and the grocer would give any mother inquiring, give her a flour bag, which was lovely cotton material. And so panties were made for girls out of flour bags. And I remember hearing the other day of a woman saying she was so upset when her mother made her some panties. They were just plain white flour bags, but the girls at school, one of them had Sydney Flour written on her pants, and she was very upset that she didn't have Sydney Flour in her pants. So those things were all part of living, and so on. And you grew up through all of that. You went to school and you played, and a lot of outdoor playing, and you played at home. You played various card games and other things. Hot weather, we had very hot weather, just like the present time hot weather. No air conditioning. It was unheard of, air conditioning. And I'd say to my mother, "Oh, it's hot, what'll I do?" Well, in those early days there were no carpets on floors. It was always lino. Lino was the material. You might have a runner up the hall or something like that, a carpet runner. But my mother, "Go and lie on the floor." And the lino was cold. So we'd all be lying around on the floor on the lino to cool down a bit, and so on. I always loved aeroplanes. To see, in my growing up days, to see a little plane in the sky flying, a biplane, was really something. And if you were to say, go to school and say, "I saw a plane on the ground at Mascot," or something, you were someone. You had seen a plane on the ground. And different ones flew from England to Australia in those early days. There was a man called Alan Cobham. He was an Englishman, and he flew out. And I remember seeing his plane in the sky before he landed at Mascot. Mascot was Chinese gardens, vegetables and all that sort of thing, a flat area, and they took part of that over and made it a landing strip for aeroplanes. No tarred strips, just grass, Mascot. And so this is how it went on. And on one occasion, I would have been about 8 or 9, we all went into the city of Sydney, and walking down Macquarie Street to the Botanical Gardens, and this huge aeroplane came across the city. Enormous aeroplane, and all these little moth planes flying around this big plane. And it was the Southern Cross, Kingsford Smith, arriving from his trip across the Pacific in America. He landed at Mascot. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people there to greet him, and his co-pilot Charles Owen and Warner, and one was a Welsh operator, one navigator. They were Americans. One was Warner and the other, I forget his name just a moment. But there were 4 of them. Now the idea was that they were to travel into the city in Sydney, and in an open car, so people could cheer them all the way into Martin Place to the Hotel Australia, which was a wonderful place in Sydney. It was the hub of Sydney, the Hotel Australia. Unfortunately, they pulled it down to build the MLC building. It's not there anymore. So we all went to Martin Place, and there were thousands around the entrance to the Hotel Australia. My mother said, "We'll never get near them here. Let's go to the other side of the road." There was no one there, right opposite the entrance on the other side of the road. And along came the car down Martin Place with the 4 airmen in it and all the people cheering. Pulled up outside the Hotel Australia. My mother said, right, let's go. And we all, 6 of us, my mother, my uncle, 2 brothers and sister and myself, 6 of us ran across to their car, shook hands with every one of them, and they all spoke to us. And the 6 of us shook hands with all of them. They didn't look at the Hotel Australia, they spent their time with us. And we said, thank you very much. And all smiling like mad. And they went into the Hotel Australia with all these thousands of people around, and we were able to shake hands with them all. But it was a fantastic thing. And that was my love of aeroplanes, so I wanted to always go into the Air Force. I went to work and worked as in a radio shop in the city of Sydney, Price's Radio. And I worked in the little workshop in there. And as I grew older, I worked there from the age of 15 at 12 and 6 a week. That's $1.25 a week, and to help at home. And my brothers were working as office boys in respective buildings in the city. That went on. We always had a roast for Sunday lunch and so on, and a leg of, we didn't have lamb. There was no such thing as lamb, it was mutton. So a sheep was called mutton, and we would get a leg of mutton, which was fairly sizable, for 3 and 11. Less than 40 cents for a leg of mutton. That would do a family of 6, and still some over for the next day in cold meat. So that was, most people lived that way. There was practically no alcohol in any home. People didn't have alcohol in their home, they didn't drink, like as we know drinking today. Some people would go up to the hotel. They were the regulars that went to the hotel. Not many, just a group of men, of course, mainly. But people didn't drink in their home. They might, at Christmas time, they might have got a couple of bottles of beer to have a glass with their neighbour or something like that. That was all. I never tasted alcohol till I was about 25. Never had a drink, and that was common. That was the way it was. I never had alcohol problems in the country. And so on, and I worked there and other places. My uncle, my mother's brother, died in 1938, in his early 50s. Yeah, we moved to a place called Earlwood then, and before we knew it, the war was coming. I joined the militia in 1938, 30th Battalion in New South Wales Scottish Regiment. I was in the Scottish Regiment, 1,000 in the regiment, 1,000 waiting to join, so it was a great time, good discipline and good fun. Dances every Saturday night. There were dances everywhere. Every suburb had dances on Saturday nights. And my wife, she and her sister used to run up a frock, make a frock up Saturday morning and wear it to the dance on Saturday night. That was common. Girls could do that. They could make their own dresses and things like that. And it went on from then. The war came in 1939. I remember in bed, and I could hear on the wireless Mr. Menzies, the Prime Minister, saying, as a consequence of what's happened in Europe, Britain is now at war with Germany, Australia is now at war with Germany. And my mother came into the bedroom and said to me, "Don't think you're going to the war." So they were famous words, but it didn't happen that way. So many did go to the war, and the war was spread around the world. I joined the Air Force, was in the Army then, the early part of the war, and then switched over to the Air Force in 1941, and trained as a wireless operator at Point Cook in Victoria. Firstly in Sydney at Ultimo, the Sydney Technical College Ultimo became the Air Force barracks. They took over the whole place. and trained all their mechanics and all sorts of things at Sydney in Ultimo. We lived in at Ultimo and marched from Ultimo to Camperdown on Parramatta Road to a building had been occupied by York Motors, and that was our theory training part and Morse code to be a wireless operator. Then to Point Cook to finish off with practical work and flying and all sorts of things connected with wireless operating.